Must be
Zupa. Apparently we are live.
Tim being lazy again. Yes, very much so.
Right, I'm just going to nip off and top up my water, etc. before we get going. So.
I have a bucket of coffee.
Oh, you've got my mug. I was wondering where that had gone.
Yeah, it's I don't know where on earth and why I have a Sports Direct mug. I mean, it's so me, obviously.
Yeah, well, is that not where you get all of your
I have got
athletics gear?
I have got a Parallels mug,
Oh.
but that's only for virtual coffee.
This is from Cafe Coffee Day. No, yes, Cafe Coffee Day in Mumbai. But anyway, I do have to go. Back in a mo.
If you combine Darren and John, you get Barry. What on earth are you talking about?
What?
Don't know. The hoi polloi have gone mad.
Oh, everyone has a Sports Direct mug. Well, possibly so. He-Man, whoever He-Man is.
It's tough. Yeah, exactly, David. We've hit the quota for the year.
I think I've got all me bits here. Hard to tell. Well, yeah, where would you be without your bits?
Or your bites.
There's something I could tell you about that, but I most definitely have to be off air. Close that, close that. Oh, ex-professional is interesting.
You are?
I'm doing a month or two of pay for Twitter.
Oh, why?
Oh, I'm just interested to see what you get, basically. And the answer is bits.
Get to play with AI stuff, don't you?
I don't think that's available
all
here
that's
yet.
worth.
Let's close. I'm just desperately trying to close Windows here. Do.
Seems like there's an exodus going on amongst the hoi polloi. I think everyone's trying to phase out. Difficult as a journalist to completely phase out.
Yeah, I would be an awful lot happy if the guy in charge wasn't such a rambling idiot.
Yeah.
But
we are live. Reminder.
I'm sure he's taking great note of what I think.
Darian's pushing his luck here on the 1 o'clock.
He
deadline.
really is here. I'm impressed by his
Is there a fine for this?
chutzpah.
Can't even spell it. According to my counter, he's got precisely 10 seconds to get his backside back on the nylon.
Have I frozen? I don't think I've frozen.
No.
Have I frozen for you? No.
No.
Okay, I've now just lost my...
1 o'clock, everybody.
Yeah, we know. We know.
We know.
Sorry, kitchen clock is slow. I thought I had time to make a cup of tea. Turned out I didn't.
Oh, for God's sake.
Right, you okay, John?
Yeah, I'm well.
You're right. Okay, let's go. Good afternoon and welcome to the PC Pro podcast. It is Thursday the 15th of August 2024 and I'm Barry Collins, features editor of PC Pro. And with me today is a man opening a can of Coke slyly, Darren Graham-Smith,
Hello there.
and John Honeyball.
Afternoon with my bucket of coffee.
Afternoon. And we start with you, Darren, and Google has been launching some new phone stuff.
They have. It was a whole big thing. It was on Tuesday evening, UK time. Google had its annual Made by Google event, and this year it was all about the Pixel 9 series. At least that's the main kind of the big launches from this one. There are now 4 Pixel phones, where previously there were, well, I guess there were only 2 a little while ago. So now the new Pixel 9, not a big shock. We've had 8 Pixels before. There's now a Pixel 9 handset you can buy, which is the latest iteration of the mid-price standard, Pixel for everyone. But the Pixel 9 Pro is not quite the same thing as last year's Pixel 8 Pro. It's shrunk. It's a similar size now to the Pixel 9. If you want the big screen, you want the new Pixel 9 Pro XL, which is it's basically exactly the same phone as the Pixel 9 Pro, but with a 3/4 inch bigger screen. And also the Pixel Fold has now been brought into the numbering scheme, so that now the top end, most expensive foldy phone is called the Pixel 9 Pro Fold. And these 4 phones can be yours at prices ranging from $799 for the standard Pixel 9 up to $1,000 for the Pro, $1,100 for the XL, and $1,749 for the Fold.
What?
Yeah, I know. I don't think these folding phones.
How much?
Well, to be fair, that's not miles out of whack with the standard book style phones that we've seen from Samsung and others. But yeah, I don't know if these are ever going to catch on at the at that sort of price. There are, as usual, some big trade-in deals. Google says you can get up to £835 off the Pixel 9 Pro Fold if you trade in, I don't know what, probably an iPhone 15 Max, I would guess. But still, it's quite pricey. And I've got to say, at first I was a little bit excited, but I don't know that there's all that much that's amazingly fresh and new in this year's iterations. The cameras have had a little bit of a bump. I think the main and zoom cameras are the same as before, but the ultra wide is a bit better. The Pixel 9 Pro and Pro XL have now got full variable refresh rate from 1 to 120 hertz. But really, it's mostly about the software. Once this is not the first time I think we've said this. Really, they're focusing on AI. Wow. New features include, Gemini Live was something they showed off. This is the conversational mode of their AI. So you can say, hey, Gemini, I'm bored, what should I do? And it could say we could watch TV, and I could say, well, what's on TV? And all that stuff. It basically turns it into an Eliza type experience. There's an interesting feature called, actually, I don't know what it's called. I don't know if it has a proper name, but the phone can now optionally read and analyze your screenshots, and you can ask questions about things you've taken screenshots of in the past. So it's a little bit like that controversial recall feature that was supposed to be coming to, was it Windows 11? But it's potentially a nice idea if you see, if you're just browsing around the web or reading articles or whatever, you can just grab a screenshot and that information becomes available to the AI. So you can say, what was that interesting computer I was looking at yesterday that had the big screen or whatever, and it should hopefully be able to work it out.
But you've got to, unlike recall, by the sounds of it, you've got to actively screenshot something. It's not sitting in the background.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right. It's not in its current form. It's not just watching everything you do and biding its time. And of course, as is always the case, there's some AI-powered photographic updates. So Magic Editor, which is the thing, we were all quite interested about 2 years ago when it said you can just remove unwanted objects, people or things from your image. You can now add them in using, generative AI. It's very now, isn't it? You can say, insert a picture of, I don't know, it's a text to image thing. I personally haven't yet really thought of a practical use for it, but if you got one?
Well, is this going to, One thing I see an awful lot of is, friends go off to a concert and they go and get a selfie with whoever the talent is. So I guess now the question will be whether you can insert Will Young into your photo, as it were, and then of course you think, well, hold on, are they going to be clever and allow the Will Youngs or celeb of your choice to make this a pay for thing, so you can AI generate your selfie, but it's going to cost you £1 or whatever.
Well, they haven't quite got to that level of cleverness yet, but it is a very live issue because there's been other things, we haven't made space for them on the podcast, but other stuff that's happened this week has included the launch of Elon Musk's Grok AI image generator, which has no safety rails and will happily produce you a picture of any celebrity doing anything you want. There's also, I think, a free tool which has been released where you can deep fake someone else's face onto your own or onto some other video. So we really are almost like fully into the you cannot trust anything you see era anyway, so I suppose maybe it's just as well, maybe it's nice that your phone lets you join in the fun.
Do you remember a year or so ago when the latest Samsung phones came out, and I found at the bottom, it was lurking at the bottom of the Samsung Australia webpage or something, that basically you were going to get 2 years free, and then they had the option to start charging for these AI features. I think they were just probably do you remember that? One of you. The time we concluded it was because they actually had no idea how much it was going to cost them to run this, and therefore they wanted a sort of a sneaky little get out of jail free card that they could start charging in the future and say, but we did tell you. So what is is there a charging model attached to this, or is it just that they're going to, harvest all your data and data mine it and send advertisers your way? How does it work?
Currently, there's no charge attached to these built-in features. Obviously, Google, I think, is using them as advertising to get you to buy into the Pixel ecosystem in general. There is the Gemini, Gemini Advanced subscription, Gemini Pro, is it? Where you can pay to unlock additional AI capabilities. But this stuff like Magic Editor, I think, is really kind of supposed to be the reason you buy a Pixel rather than an add-on. It may be in future that something changes, but one of the things about Pixels is you now get a guarantee of 7 years of updates. Although, as has been pointed out, it's not guaranteed when or whether my Pixel 7 Pro, which should still have 5 years left on the clock, or possibly slightly fewer because it's an older model, but it's still very much in support. It's not clear when or whether that's going to get these same AI features because Google obviously is building... all of these, by the way, include the new Google Tensor G4 CPU with its built-in AI smarts that powers a lot of this stuff, and older phones obviously don't have it. Just very quickly to finish up on the photographic AI stuff, there's also a feature called Add Me, which I think I quite like the idea of, which is if you take a photo of a friend, for example, you can now hand them the phone, go and swap out, go and stand next to them. They can take a photo and the phone can put you together. So you no longer have to argue over who's going to be in the photo and who's going to take it. You can have it magically composed together. That, I think, is the main stuff about the new phones, which are, they're going to trickle out over the next 6 weeks, I think.
Okay, and just so there's the Google also have the A, don't they? I've got an 8A here, but that tends to come out sort of 6 months after the rest of them, doesn't it? So there's no new A yet.
That's just to get a little bit of buzz halfway through the release cycle, I think, and it's generally been an affordable kind of, this is the best of the affordable stuff that we can do now. But I don't think it's particularly noteworthy, and nothing's been said about it this week.
Okay, I mean we are in this sort of cycle with phones, as you said, where I think with all of this generation, be it Samsung, Apple, Google now. Apart from the AI wibbles, there's been nothing at all to really get excited about, has there?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the most exciting thing I reckon about this particular launch was the idea that I could get a Pixel Pro phone in a smaller size, so it wasn't quite such a VHS tape in my pocket. But Yeah, it's not worth £1,000 to me, or even the 600 it would work out with a trade in. But that's good. I mean, we should be transitioning to a more sustainable model where we're not. I mean, I was saying to Lisa the other day. Do you remember when you used to upgrade your phone every 12 months, and after 9 months they might even phone you up and say we'd like to re-up you for another year so we can give you an upgrade right now. That kind of massively accelerated or massively super fast initial rate of upgrade has very much slowed, and it's got to be a good thing for almost every aspect except the excitement that you used to have of every 9 months getting snazzy new features.
I've got a new feature excitement to show you. You'll be impressed by this. My Samsung S24 Ultra. On the bottom, I press this little button, and out comes the pen. And I'm now going to put it back in again. And I can tell you that's the third time I've done that in the life of owning this phone. And that's my level of excitement with new hardware on phones, I'm afraid to say. Because, as you say, there is nothing really new happening. I would quite like to have, twice the battery life, 3 times the battery life would be nice. I'd even take a thicker case because, I always put a sort of a case around this is a 15 Pro Max. I'm trying out quad lock cases at the moment, which are rather interesting because they call them quad lock mag. And you might think that it's a magnetic mount, and you might think that it's actually MagSafe, but it isn't, even though they say so on the box of the product. And they've admitted to me that it isn't MagSafe at all. But that's another matter. I mean, why can't this sort of stuff be sort of built in and part of the platform?
Sorry, this is completely out of left field, but I've been asked on Discord to clarify that the image generator, the completely wacky one that I mentioned earlier, is not Elon Musk's. It's a third-party thing. I think I may have associated it with Twitter because these scurrilous images have been, flying around freely on that particular platform, as you would expect. But no, he doesn't get the credit for that.
Okay. All right. Well, unless there's anything more to say about Google's loveliness and the...
Well, I mean, we can mention that they also released the next update of their earbuds, which it's not that interesting. I mean, headphones, I think, have never really been an absolute hotbed of innovation. The new Pixel...
Oh, they have. Oh, I must disagree.
Okay,
Heavens
well,
above.
Maybe there was a period when every 6 months something would come along that really broke boundaries, but it's been a while. And the new Pixel Buds Pro 2, they've got a new processor which is supposed to do better noise cancellation. They supposedly fully support Bluetooth LE audio, which I'm interested in, but whenever I've tried using it, it's too flaky. Apparently the energy is just too low, and it's 220 quid for a pair of earbuds. So, the other thing is the Pixel Watch 3, third generation of their wrist wearable, and it's not really very different to the 2. The display is very slightly bigger, very slightly brighter, but if you didn't have the two of them next to one another, you probably wouldn't notice. And other than that, the updates are, as with the phones, mostly to do with software, things it can do in terms of fitness tracking and programming routines and workouts, and then it will buzz to let you know if you're, behind the pace or whatever. It's all fine, but it's not a red letter day, I would say.
Just one question about these new sort of AI loveliness services that Google are bundling. This is really starting to bifurcate what. Is that the right word? It'll do. What Google is doing here, because obviously Google is responsible for Android. So the question is, what is a Google phone feature versus what is an Android feature? And please correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Google Pixel market share sort of right down at the bottom of the bucket and no one notices? It is very, very small compared to, the big players here, of course, are Apple and Samsung, but there's plenty of other players out there. And my memory was that at least up to a couple of years ago, Google were doing their phones almost like a reference platform for a new version of Android, rather than actually attempting to go for a mainstream thing. So my question here, I guess, and it's a broader question, is, are they prototyping features in this new phone hardware, which they're going to intend to push out onto the mainstream Android platform?
I think as usual with Google, it's kind of hard to discern a single coherent strategy. But my perception is that I think that I agree with you that the Pixel for a while was like a reference platform
Yeah.
for geeks and people who didn't like the flashy Samsung or OnePlus or whatever kind of stylings. But with the 7, it seemed that they really decided to push it to push it into the consumer space. The 7 was a big kind of success. It had, the 7 Pro had the mega cameras. I remember lots and lots of buzz about it. Everyone was talking about it. By everyone, I mean all the nerds I associate with. But it was certainly made a much bigger splash than before. And since then, the Pixel has now. I've got just a figure here from, this is actually Gemini AI telling me this, so who the hell knows how reliable it is. But it says that their market share nearly doubled to around 5% in the US last year, which obviously is on the back of, assuming it's true, the success of the 7 and subsequently the 8. So it looks like Google is maybe Google's got a bit fed up of just making the hardware and the platform and not getting all the revenue, or maybe. I don't know. Maybe this is a bigger pivot, or sorry, who the hell knows? It's really
Yeah, I mean, the point here, of course, is that getting access to a stable version of the new operating system on Google's own hardware was quite a draw, and also it didn't have all of the cruft that some of the manufacturers like to put in. I mean, a lot of people I know would be quite offended at me saying that all the stuff that Samsung throws in, for example, I really would be quite happy if I never saw Bixby again in my life. But there are some good things in there, like the security and encryption stuff. I'm not knocking all of it. But the question is, what is now a reference version of Android on straightforward hardware? And maybe the answer is Fairphone.
I think for the time being, unless I'm misunderstanding, the AI elements of the Pixel phones and the things which Google is calling Pixel exclusive, I think they're all bundled up in apps. I think it's like the Google Camera app or the Google Assistant / Gemini app. So I think the kind of the AOSP side of things is not affected. I might be mistaken about this, of course, and it may be that could change at the drop of a hat. That could change with the next update. But for the time being, I haven't heard anything official about it, but I perceive that not just Google, but all the Android manufacturers are kind of doing AI in sort of containers separate from the OS.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I mean, all these features are one of the same for every major manufacturer now. I mean, there's a fag paper between them in terms of functionality. So it's what is the differentiation these days? As far as Google making its own hardware, that just reminds me of the situation with Microsoft and Surface, where it claimed to start out as some kind of role model for how the hardware should be, and it ends up just being part of their business. I'm always I was deeply suspicious of Microsoft's claims about that when it started, and same with Google. I think it's just another revenue driver for them now, but there we go.
Yeah, I mean, the early thoughts that they put out about being a reference platform for Windows is entirely right and proper. You only had to look at the amount of cruft and rubbish that was getting bundled in from so forth.
What changed? Nothing's changed. Everyone's still doing it.
Everyone, yes, well, exactly so. Everyone's still doing it. And if you're being particularly mean, you could say Microsoft has just got in on the act by putting all of this advertising and data mining, blah, blah, blah. I'm waving my hands around here, but you know what I mean, that kind of stuff, straight into the Windows 11 operating system anyway. Well, that's a contentious point of view. I like the idea of a straightforward platform that's clean and simple, and to an extent, Microsoft Surface is still that. And I slightly rue what seems to have been happening with the Google Pixels, that you can't go to one and know that it is a straightforward, clean platform without lots of other stuff. But then that, of course, as I said, opens up the question of what is Google phone platform and what is Android platform, and at some point they're going to have to clarify this.
Well, this has always been a bone of contention, because there was that period where you could buy Chinese phones that have the Android underlying operating system, but not Google Play services, not the Google App Store, and I don't think anyone was happy about that.
All right, well, we sort of trickled into PCs for a moment there, and our next story is back on with this Intel issue, John.
Well, the Intel story just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling, doesn't it? Another week and another set of of unpleasantness. Just a sort of a recap here, there seems to be a fairly significant bit of problems with the 13th and 14th generation Raptor Lake desktop processors, where if you have been overclocking them or driving them a bit harder or whatever, they can basically keel over and die. And now maybe some manufacturers are being a little bit fast and loose with some of the specifications to get better performance. Maybe manufacturers of some motherboards have been opening up capabilities that possibly, with hindsight, the CPU should never have been subjected to. And I'm sure, lawyers are going to be very well kept busy on this front. But the question has actually, of course, arisen, which is, what's Intel going to do to support this? Now, they did state what was going to happen if you had bought a chip. So if you had actually had a packaged CPU and you had stuffed it onto a motherboard, that it was actually relatively straightforward, because you could take it out and package it up again and send it off to Intel, and they'll sell you a replacement. The problem comes, what happens if you've built it into, or if you bought it rather, as a complete packaged computer? There are many good reasons these days for wanting to buy that packaged entire device. Dell, for example, does an excellent job of Dell's updater to do all firmware and BIOSes and everything from one update, and drivers from one update program. Our gaming machine that we have here I think it's from Chill Blast, has an Asus motherboard and a 3080 graphics card and so forth, and it's a major pain trying to keep everything updated. So what happens if you've bought your chip inside something? And it was reported on the Verge, they've gone out and asked a number of companies, and basically these companies are saying that they've got an additional 2-year warranty extension, sometimes up to 5 years warranty on this, so that if it goes wrong and you can show that it was the CPU that's gone wrong, then you will be covered. Is that enough?
Well,
I'm not sure.
That's interesting, John, because for the next issue of PC Pro, I've been writing a news investigation into this, and I've spoken to at least 2 of the British PC vendors, and they're pretty upset about this, in the sense that Intel, yes, did on retail CPUs say we're extending the warranty for another 2 years, but they've not made it clear if they're doing it on OEM processors, which only by default carry a 1-year warranty, whereas retail processors carry a 3-year warranty. So I wonder if there's maybe it's the bigger OEMs that Intel's been communicating with and have this deal maybe in place with the likes of Dell and HP and Lenovo that hasn't yet trickled down to the smaller British PC vendors, or if that's perhaps a little miscommunication going on. But that's certainly not what British PC companies have been telling me.
Well, it would be interesting to know, wouldn't it? The likes of, I'm just plucking names out of the air, people like Chill Blast and so forth. Where do they actually buy their Intel CPUs from? Do they buy them directly from Intel, or do they have to come through some sort of a distributor?
Yes,
in which case, is it the distributor that sat in the middle here? And I'm not suggesting for a moment that they're trying to hide stuff. It's just these things will take time. As always, it comes down to a question of who's picking up the bill. Because if you are buying from a distributor and the distributor is buying from Intel's distribution for Europe or whatever, then if you have a bad CPU, that's quite a lot of additional steps to push it up the chain, rather than Dell dealing with it, for example.
But that doesn't help if you're a PC vendor and people are coming to you and saying, I want my money back. And they're like, well...
Absolutely. And again, at the end of the day, follow the money. What's going to happen here? And this is going to hurt Intel for a very long time. If nothing else, it's going to be reputationally a problem. So yeah, that's what's happening there. There is another piece. Sorry, did you have anything, Darren, you wanted to say on that?
Only that it looked like, from the reports I'd seen, that Intel was contacting OEMs, PC builders individually, and talking to them. Like there's been statements from Dell and HP and so on saying we have been notified by Intel that. So perhaps there will come a time when they get, when they move on to Inspiration computers or whatever, they just weren't top of their list. That's the charitable, optimistic read, anyway.
So the other piece of news out of the current annus horribilis for Intel, and thank you to Her Majesty for the use of that wonderful term. As you know, they've made a $1.6 billion loss for the second quarter, which is really remarkably careless, really, when you're that big and you have that much, if I may use the term, control over the market or impact on the market. To end up making that size of a loss is really not very clever. They have just sold their holding in ARM processors. They've sold it for $147 million apparently, and during the second quarter they've been divesting themselves of assets to try to reduce this plane crash to their finances. And yeah, $147 million is quite a lot of money, but it's not a game changer when you're actually at the end of it posting a $1.6 billion loss. They're also getting rid of some software bits, a company called Astera Labs, Zero Fox, I'm reading of, and so forth. They're also losing market share badly to AMD. And I say badly, it's some percentage, but in this marketplace where margin is everything, a shift of a few percentage points can make a very dismal difference to your bottom line. And of course, there's the whole ARM problem that they have, which of course you might think is weird, having just sold their holding in ARM. But obviously Apple with the M, but also Windows on ARM, and what Qualcomm is doing in that space, for which I still have mixed views. The Qualcomm Snapdragon stuff is undoubtedly very good and clever, as we've talked about in previous weeks, but there is still no sign of any Snapdragon X desktop units or mini PCs or whatever. And what is the problem here? I can't work this out. Is it a Microsoft problem? Is it a Qualcomm problem? Is it a Dell problem? Because you would want to go and buy these things by the crate load from Dell if you're refurbishing an office, for example. So I don't know what's going on there, but certainly Intel is in turmoil.
Yeah, I saw this sell-off of the ARM shares, and Intel's revenue for the last financial year was $55.2 billion. So they can get 150 million in through the door right now by selling off this stock, but that's a 1/10 of their annual revenue. I wondered if it was more kind of to do, it was partly a symbolic move of not investing in the competition, and also maybe just a more general focusing of, we're not a speculating company, we are focused inwards. Because otherwise, yeah, it doesn't. It didn't really make an awful lot of sense for them to have such a small holding in ARM anyway. But to divest it now, in particular, when I know, yes, their financials don't look great, but they are sort of turning around compared to where they were a couple of years ago. The losses are not as precipitous. The roadmap is not as dire. So it's a curious one.
It's a nice PR thing as well, though, isn't it? If you're, especially at a time when they're laying off 15,000 jobs, it allows them to say, "Look, we're doing everything we can to try and bring some money."
So,
through the
do you
door."
think, from that point of view, it is that the sale is essentially PR, that they're getting rid of a corporate jet or two and cutting back on expenditure? Because when you get rid of 15,000 members of staff, which is a significant proportion of their staff base, now we have to be realistic here. I mean, X, Twitter, is still around despite Musk firing 75% of the staff, and at the time people predicted that that there was absolutely no way that Twitter X could continue from an engineering point of view. It would all fall apart and so forth, and it's still going today. Now
Except when they try and do a live stream, of course.
Yeah.
well, except when they tried to do a live stream, but maybe that was the Donald Trump effect. I don't know, but they are still going. it's an entirely different question about how many of the people were doing content moderation and so forth, and quite possibly they're not doing that now. But nevertheless, the business is still going. It would be interesting to know what the people were doing at Intel who have been left off. Were they left off? Were they in R&D? Were they in production engineering? Were they in fabrication? Were they in marketing and HR? I'm not for a moment suggesting that those aren't important spaces. I'm just saying it would be very interesting to know what areas they've been laying people off from. And maybe that information will come out in the near future.
Interestingly, the headline that I found says that one of the biggest cuts is going to be R&D and marketing. Marketing kind of makes sense. I mean, we already know about Intel. Like, there's only so much that marketing is going to do. But considering they're trying to technologically dig themselves out of a hole, I'm surprised that R&D has been targeted. I would have thought that could be, their springboard out of where they are.
I think there's a sense with every, I think it's especially true of tech companies, that they just expand and contract staff numbers depending on how their current financial situation is. So the amount of staff these companies have is often bears no relation to how many staff they actually need, or to fill specific roles. They just go with whatever the balance sheet says, and you often see, as we've seen over the last couple of years, where profits start to contract, so do numbers, and obviously the American labour laws make it a little easier to do that than they would do over here in Europe.
And also, of course, we've got to remember that it's an oft-quoted meme that in the past these super large companies in America have been hiring people simply so that they can't go to one of their competitors, and they basically sort of bulked up their business because they thought that was actually a good way of harming their competition, if you want to put it that way. And it's obviously a tragedy for those people who are being left off and having their lives turned upside down.
Yeah. Okay. On that rather somber note, let's talk about another company that's not exactly firing right now, and that's Mozilla. Now, Mozilla has put out, they have a new CEO who's given an interview to, what was the publication? Forgive me, Fast Company. And they're basically saying that they're going to put pedal to metal on Firefox again. They're not saying it in so many words, but they're saying they've sort of rather taken their eye off the ball in return in terms of the browser itself. Certainly over the past few years, Mozilla's been trying a few different things like VPNs and security subscription stuff to try and pad out its offering, if you like. But the new CEO, Laura Chambers, says that they want to refocus on Firefox after years of neglect, which is a sort of interesting admission. They don't really give us any indication of what they're going to do to revitalize the browser. They're talking about adding new features like vertical tabs, which I'm not sure is really a game changer, and focusing again on web apps, which feels like 2005 wanting its features back. But they're basically saying that they need to start diversifying their revenue sources again, because as became apparent last week when I think it was the whole Apple case kicked off, that Mozilla is very heavily reliant on Google. I think about 95% of its revenue, I believe, comes from basically Google being the default search engine in Firefox, and the little slice of income that Google pays for each user. And Mozilla has long said it's been trying to wean itself off this reliance on Google, because it only takes Google to say, actually, guys, we're not going to bother. And to some extent, it's actually surprising that Google still does bother, given Firefox has such a slight market share these days. But I guess the bigger question really is what do we need Firefox for these days? Because in the old days, certainly when it was ragingly popular back in the early 2000s, it was the faster, more nimble, privacy-focused alternative to Internet Explorer. Then Google Chrome came along and smashed it out the way, really. But I mean, these days, if you're focused on privacy, you're likely going to something like Brave or Vivaldi, which has all of these privacy features built in. If you're looking for speed, it's more than likely Chrome or Safari if you're on a Mac. So what could Mozilla do with Firefox that's going to reverse this long trend downwards? I really struggle to find a place in the industry for it. I don't know if you guys have got any ideas.
No, we've got too many browsers. I mean, I was while you were talking, I was trying to think what could Firefox Mozilla actually offer to make me want to switch from Chrome, and I couldn't think of anything. So I googled reasons to switch away from Chrome. Gemini has some suggestions actually. There are privacy issues, is the big one. Resource usage. And Google's power to make changes, such as, there's been a lot of talk about changes that affect the ability of ad blockers to work, or changes that make it arguably easier or harder for third parties to learn about you. And those are fine political reasons, but as you say, there are other browsers. I mean, Opera still survives. You mentioned Brave. Firefox in particular, I think the only USP it really has for me is nostalgia.
I have to agree. I mean, for years, like I think all of us, I was a Firefox centric user, and there was this like sort of rebel element to it, that it wasn't Microsoft Internet Explorer and it wasn't Chrome, and I don't know why, it just kind of just dropped off my radar really. I moved to Google Chrome for a while, and then got quite annoyed with what I perceived, rightly or wrongly, Google to be doing with all of this data in the background, despite me having changed the default search engine and so forth. I liked the Chromium platform because of all the privacy plugins and so forth that I could drop into it to further filter my feed. And then I moved to Microsoft Edge. And I confess I'm falling out of favour with Microsoft Edge now, at least on Mac, because it can be a ridiculous resource hog. Um, and yet maybe I'm being a bad boy and having 30 or 40 tab windows open or whatever, but nevertheless it can bring a machine to its knees, and certainly on some of my older hardware like Intel based Mac stuff, it can cause the fans to spin up, and I regularly see 150, 170% of one CPU core just sitting there on Microsoft Edge. So I confess I'm actually going back to Safari. Um, Safari with a couple of add-ins like Bitwarden for password management and so forth, and the odd privacy additional bit and so forth, and it's lightweight and doesn't cause my computer to grind to a halt. Obviously, on Windows, you've got Edge in the system, and I would certainly take Microsoft Edge over Google Chrome any day. But the big problem, as you alluded to, is this change of plugin structure that Google is bringing, which clearly, whether it was the primary or a secondary issue, was designed to stop an awful lot of the ad blocking and filtering type of plugins. So that's another reason for me to sort of move off the Chromium platform, I'm afraid to say.
Well, moving off the Chromium platform, of course, is not easy to do. Firefox is one of the few major, if you can call it that, browsers that doesn't use it now. You mentioned Safari, but of course, yes, it's very popular among people who can use it, but I work across multiple platforms. I spend a lot of my time in Windows. My phone is an Android, so I don't really want to be switching back and forth between Safari and a different browser. And just to mention Edge, I know people say it's fine, but I refuse to use it solely as an act of resistance against the way that it's been kind of forced upon us. And not only that, the way that Windows will actively try to dissuade you from installing an alternative browser if you dare to try it.
And I don't want some of the features that are appearing in Microsoft Edge. I don't want the AI add-ins. I don't want some of the... I was using Edge a couple of days ago, actually on Windows 11, and I went to a site and I suddenly got Microsoft Shopping recommendations dropped down in front of my face. And I don't want that stuff, thank you very much. I know I can nail it down, I know I can turn it off, but at the end of the day, I find it annoying beyond any reasonable reason, if I can put it that way. So yeah, I'm kind of... it would be very disappointing if Firefox got snuffed out because Google decided it was time to pull the plug. But it would be, as we said last week, very sad if Google took this current and impending legal wrangling as the excuse for them to be able to do that. And just say, well, our hands were tied, we had no choice, we had to cut off the funding. Oh dear, never mind.
The one I use here is Vivaldi because that has the Chromium engine. It's cross-platform, so it works Windows, Mac, Android as well, and it has those features built in. So you're right, John. There's this issue with Manifest v3 on Chrome extensions that's having some issues with these add-on privacy tracking blocker things, but that's all built into Vivaldi. So if you want it, and I don't have it turned on, if I'm being honest, I only use it for certain websites. What's a really good feature of Vivaldi is you can say just block ads on this website because it gets so intrusive I just can't even read the flipping content. But anyway, there's a whole, as we say, a whole range of browsers out there, and I see from the comments on Discord a whole range being used by listeners as well, including Arc and Edge and Chrome appear to be the most popular. A couple of Firefox holdouts still in the audience. So, I mean, nobody thinks competition's a bad thing, and choice is always good, but it's going to be interesting to see how much longer Mozilla can keep Firefox ticking. But let's shuffle along and back with you, Darren, and Microsoft.
Yes, me and Microsoft. So Microsoft has announced that it's going to enable BitLocker, the full device encryption system, by default on new PCs that you buy running the next release of Windows 11. And this now includes ones running Windows 11 Home. Previously, Home editions of Windows used a slightly different, not quite as robustly professional full device encryption system, but now it's going to be BitLocker for all. If you upgrade your existing Windows 11 system to the next edition, that 24H2 update that's coming soon, you won't be forcibly moved on to BitLocker. Your stuff will remain unencrypted, but if you do a clean install, then it will apply BitLocker by default. This is concerning some people who are worried that individuals may not know what to do in the event of some kind of boot problem that causes Windows to pop up and say, what's your BitLocker recovery key? I think that obviously is a little bit fresh in the memory because just last week or the week before there was a glitch that caused Windows machines to come up and demand that of people who had no idea what it was talking about. But I don't think it's a regular problem in, for example, the business community where, work laptops are BitLockered by default all the time, and one doesn't really hear very often of regular BitLocker going wrong in any, in a particular way because of the way BitLocker is implemented. I mean, if you can log in to your Windows account, then ipso facto you have unlocked you have decrypted your drive. So I'm not sure that's much of a concern. Perhaps Microsoft may have done a bit of weighing up as to whether there was a risk attached to this and concluded it was worth it. The other thing people say is that because there is a bit more wear on an SSD, I believe. I'm not quite sure where this idea comes from. It seems to me if the encryption and decryption are done in firmware, then the actual chips in your SSD should only be hit the same number of times as if you were writing as if you were using it in plain, although perhaps they're just talking about the process of doing the encrypting in the first place on a load of at-rest data. Anyway, that sounds to me like a very overblown concern, but nevertheless, this is a situation where Microsoft is basically making fundamental behind-the-scenes changes to the way the operating system works and installs and stores itself and your data, and that, I think, warrants just a little bit of a conversation.
What's their justification for switching on by default after all this time?
Do you know, I haven't seen an official justification. I can dig it out and see if there is, but I'm sure they will just say to enhance security.
John, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we should be, actively applauding Microsoft for doing this. These computers have had the capability to do this for a while. If I was to to make any kind of criticism of it. It's like, why wasn't this done before? Especially with the hardware specification requirements that came in with Windows 11, for example. Surely that would have been a good time to have done this. But okay, we can argue, better to be done late than not at all. And certainly encrypting storage is a damn good idea, and people should be doing it. And surely it's a no-brainer from that point of view.
My only concern might be and it's a shame he's not here this week, the Lees of this world who sometimes have to go and fish files off of people's hard disks and stuff, whether that having BitLocker turned on is going to make that more difficult in future, because presumably you need the recovery keys to...
Yes, but again, in fairness to Microsoft, it's not their fault if you don't have any kind of backup of your data. They do provide OneDrive. In fact, if you want to criticize Microsoft, you could argue that they provide OneDrive in a really quite aggressive fashion these days on a lot of installations, where the redirect to OneDrive /desktop and /documents and so forth is on by default.
So OneDrive a backup now, are we?
No, I'm not saying it's a back. I mean, a copy on OneDrive is better than not having a copy of your data at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I personally don't use OneDrive. I'm not saying anything wrong with it. It doesn't fit the way that we work here. And so that's fine. We have other cloud services, we have local storage, and we have distributed storage and stuff. That's just my use case. But I don't think you can level a criticism at Microsoft for saying that it's bad, that it might make things difficult. If your if your laptop goes bang and you don't have a key for it, well, sorry, that's an entirely different issue and a different set of conversations.
Yes and no. I mean, I'd say Microsoft, especially with the amount of fiddling around the backup tools in Windows over the last few years, has not made it easy to back up a system. I see people on Jeff Campbell, for example, on Discord saying OneDrive is a good first line backup. Yes, just about. I would let you have that point, but it's problematic as well. The other thing is, BitLocker keys. I guarantee you, 99% of consumers who've got BitLocker turned on, if they have got it turned on, will not know where their BitLocker keys is. I've got 3 Windows PCs in front of me. I couldn't tell you where my own BitLocker keys are because, it's just one of those things that's ever easy to keep, and you've got to print them out or they've got to be stored somewhere.
Don't they get stored into OneDrive by default?
I honestly couldn't tell you, to be brutally frank, but
I think I got mine from my Microsoft account online. But yeah, they don't make it clear where to look. That is a very valid.
So, and if they're going to turn this on by default, I think they need to make a much better job of saying this is what it is, and this is the information you're going to need, and this is where to find it if this goes wrong. Because maybe I'm just blithely clicking through the 19 different setup screens in Windows when I'm doing it, and they do. But if that's the case, if I'm not spotting it, I can pretty much guarantee you, and I'm not claiming any great intelligence, but if I'm not spotting it, I guarantee the vast majority of consumers aren't spotting it either.
And of course, it's an entirely fair criticism, not just of Microsoft, but of the whole industry, that these things are too complicated in the eyes of Joe Public, who they don't want to know about this stuff. They don't want to know about hard disk encryption. They just want their stuff to be safe, and they want it to work. And they don't want to know about the mumbo jumbo. And when they have to recover their stuff, they just want recovery to work, and they're not interested in imaging and this and that and where the key store is and so on and so forth. So in a sense, they're sort of hoisted by their own petard here.
Yeah.
But no, overall, turning BitLocker encryption on across even home products moving forward, I think is well overdue.
Okay. All right. Time to shuffle along because we're crashing on 2 o'clock, and it's the lovely Nibs. And I'm going to start with me this week, and this one is Apple, which has relented somewhat in the EU over allowing companies to publicise where you can go and pay for their products. So Apple has basically banned companies such as Spotify in the past from publicising any cheaper routes to buy products other than direct via Apple, so that Apple can take its 30% cut. It seems with the EU looking over its shoulder that Spotify has now been allowed to say you can go and get you can sign up for Spotify on the Spotify website at these prices, but they're not allowed to create a hyperlink to the Spotify website. They're not even allowed to write Spotify.com. Apparently, Apple kicked off about that, so they have to say directly the Spotify website. But it appears that this shadow game we play, where companies practically have to hide the fact that they sell these products sometimes cheaper elsewhere, those days appear to be coming to an end. John, I know you wanted to talk about Patreon and Apple having a little square off as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to find where I put this link here. It doesn't matter. We'll just riff it. I was reading overnight that that Apple or Patreon are saying that Apple is saying that they have to give 30% of their Patreon receipts to Apple if it's done through the Apple app, the Patreon app, rather than through the Patreon website. Now, as is the case with all of these things, I suspect we're going to see some movement. I think we're going to see possibly Apple even doing a lower subscription rate for platforms like Patreon, where you don't go to Patreon to get content, you go to Patreon to support a channel or a person or something like that, and that's quite a different thing to paying for something, if that kind of makes sense. I mean, I've pay Patreon for some car related stuff. I mean, Johnny Smith's stuff, Sniff and Smith, and the excellent Tacona, which is a chap who does stuff about mental health for men. And you know, we're talking trivial amounts, like 4 or 5 quid a month kind of stuff. It's a pint of beer a month each, put it in those terms, and it's a nominal amount, and it's helping them support doing what they're doing. I would be quite annoyed if Apple wanted 30% of that, because Patreon itself takes a slice. You could argue maybe that a deal will come to where Apple takes 30% of what Patreon takes, rather than 30% of the total amount. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how this plays out.
Okay. Second nib this week is a little row brewing in the civil service, where apparently they're already starting to use AI to answer some queries from in this case in particular the Treasury, where if you write into the Treasury and have a query about your tax or you're complaining about something, apparently the Treasury is already trialing an AI system where it basically generates a response or suggests a response to the person, who then actually looks at it and decides how to actually respond themselves. It seems like quite a good use of AI to me. But the government apparently is in talks to spread this system across more departments, but the unions are beginning to kick off at this, presumably worried about jobs for customer support agents vanishing in the mist. And so there's a little row brewing between the government and the unions over how far AI should spread. But that's one we'll need to keep an eye on. And finally, John, the third nibs with you.
Yes, we've in the past we've appropriately ranted and raved about subscription costs for platforms like Adobe, and we've discussed some of our favourite alternatives, one of mine being the Affinity Platform from Serif. They do 3 products. One's called Designer, which is a vector-based graphics tool, Affinity Photo, which is a sort of a Photoshop-alike kind of product, and Affinity Publisher, which is a DTP product. These are not lightweight tools. These are very capable tools, and the only reason for not using them is that they are not InDesign and not Photoshop. And if you're working in an environment where it must be Photoshop or InDesign or Illustrator, then these fall at the first hurdle simply because they are not those tools. However, they are incredibly capable, and they're also incredibly capable cross-platform. They're available for Mac OS, Windows, and iPad. And it's nice, actually. It's one of my favorite demos on iPad OS, on a decent iPad, as to what you can do on an iPad to spell that whole content creation versus content consumption thing. Anyway, if you buy all 3 of them as a bundle, it's a one shot with no subscription, and it's usually £159.99, which gets you all the tools on all three platforms for all of your machines, which I think you would have to agree is awfully cheap. But occasionally they do a special offer, and there is a special offer running until the end of today, which is the 15th of August, Thursday the 15th of August, and it's half price. It's £79.99 for the whole lot, one-off payment, all licenses. Now, when they do a platform version 3, there'll undoubtedly be an upgrade cost, but it's basically yours for life for £79.99, and I cannot think of a better bargain to splash your 80 quid on today.
Good stuff. Well, talking of stuff to splash your money on, John, the hardware's with you this week.
Yeah, well, the people on Discord have been moaning at us that we haven't had enough keyboards. Lee tried last week with a little keyboard for an iPad, and we loved it because it was all of 30 quid, or was it £9.99 and a packet of crisps or something. But and he swears by it, and he says that all of his writing for the last umpteen years was done on the previous one, so clearly it works. So I'm always on the lookout for really decent quality keyboards. My sort of daily driver here is a proper mechanical clicky keyboard from a company called Daz Keyboard, and it's been very good. But I've always wanted to look at the keyboards from a well-known company called Keychron. And let me just post over here the necessary links for this. And I was actually looking for a relatively small but properly sized keyboard. What I mean by that is companies will make actually sort of undersized keyboards, and I don't like that because it's all my fingers going to the wrong place. But I have just purchased and got running one of these things. It's called a Keychron K8 mechanical keyboard, and it's got everything you need except for a numerical keypad. Now, is it numerical keypad necessary? Well, they do versions of this with numerical keypads. I wanted something that was narrow and totally usable. It's battery powered, but you can power it via USB. You can connect it via Bluetooth, and you can connect to 3 different computers and use a hotkey to switch between them. Of course, if you're USB connected, it's hard connected into the device that you're connected into. It has let me switch here. It's got keyboard assignments for Windows, Android on one side, Mac OS on the other. The great thing of this is you can switch it between either modes. All the key tops come off, all the keys come out, and they do 3 different versions of the key switch action. And I've gone for what they call the blue key. I think it's called the blue key top type, which is a proper old style IBM style clacky, over-centered, properly sprung key with a proper hard bottom to it. It's a noisy key, as you can probably hear from me tapping away on it. But this thing is built like a brick something house. This little keyboard is 900 grams weight, and it's made out of metal, right? You could probably inflict quite an injury on somebody with this thing. It's beautifully built. It works really well. It's incredibly functional, and they do all sorts of different key tops, different key colors. If you want to do specialist keys, you can just pull the tops off and do it. You can reprogram it. This one's backlit, and it's got full color backlighting inside the keyboard here. I don't know if I can get that up and running here. If I say onto Bluetooth here. Okay, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but the whole thing is multicolor backlit, and you can decide what color you want, or rainbow effects, or all sorts of stuff. Battery life is something like 130 hours or something without backlighting, so nothing to get worried about. You just plug it in for a quick USB charge. It's got a lovely action. It does everything you could possibly need on a compact keyboard. As I said, Running Dax asking where is the number pad, and the answer is, well, they sell separate number pads if you want one, or they do a version of this keyboard with the number pad in. Keychron make an enormous range of keyboards and keyboard options and stuff. So this is the one that I wanted, the clicky key in the more compact dimensions, and I was prepared to forego forego the number pad, you'll notice that it actually has. I'm going to turn this keyboard off because it's decided to try and take over this computer. It has a proper cursor key arrangement here. This is all very sensible and useful stuff. I leave it to you for some questions, gentle persons.
Does it switch between Mac and PC easily?
Yes. There is a key switch on the side.
And is the lettering doubled up for PC and Mac, or?
Well, I've got Mac keys on here, so I've got options and command and so forth. But I'd actually have to go back to the box. I think it comes with the full set of window key tops as well.
Right. Yeah.
But I would have to double check that. But certainly you can get whatever you want and just pull the. They even come with a tool to take the keys off. It is designed for you to take it apart and clean it, which is useful on a heavily used keyboard.
Darren?
Well, I mean, I feel like when Lisa takes me to one of her contemporary dance shows, and I sit there and people are
Very similar. Very similar.
Oh, what?
People are twirling around and they're doing they're rolling around on the floor and they're extending their arms, and at the end there's rapturous applause, and I'm like, well, okay, I'm sure that was good. I don't get it. Why are keyboards such a?
Why are keyboards? I mean, Darren, you'd spend your entire working life hammering words into a computer.
But I bought one, and it's fine. And I don't need to buy keyboards every 6 weeks when a new one comes up on the podcast.
Anyone's
Well, I haven't.
suggesting you do.
I didn't. My DAS keyboard has been sat here working away beautifully for about 7 years with no problems, and I'm not getting rid of it. The only reason I bought this keyboard is because I'm looking at you here from my Mac Mini setup with the 5K LG screen. Here I have on my desk an Apple 5K screen and my MacBook Pro M1 Ultra here, and I wanted a keyboard for that. So rather than, given that the DAS keyboard is a USB keyboard, I actually tend to prefer to switch between things rather than hotkeying.
I totally get
so
that.
I needed a new keyboard, and I wanted one that was a bit smaller to work here rather than the one working here.
Yeah, one keyboard per computer makes perfect sense to me. And to be fair, I'm not really talking to you, John. It's someone else on this podcast who seems to have presented quite a lot of keyboards.
Hey, you back off, my friend. I've got another one lined up. John's rather queered the pitch for this. I might have to wait a few weeks now, but there's a beauty coming along. But in the meantime, let's move along with the votes on this one. John, did you say a price, by the way?
Oh, goodness me, don't be so petty. Well, you can buy it from Keychron, but that's an American site, which is, of course, where they're headquartered. It's $99. I bought it through Amazon, but actually from the Keyboard Company. So that's keyboardco.com, which is a very good UK company that only sells keyboards, and they sell it with the blue keys. It's 99 quid.
Okay. For some reason, the simple poll appears to have crashed on the Discord. For how you managed to crash a poll, I don't know. But so if our live listeners can either enter hot or not in text in old schooly fashion, and I will try and do a head count rather than look at the poll numbers. In the studio, let's start with you, Darian.
Okay, well, I mean, as I've kind of shown my hand, I don't really get the excitement about a keyboard having blue switches and switchable keycaps and so on. But you're right that a keyboard is, the things you interact with every day, all the time, are super important. I wouldn't go with a cheap, nasty monitor. I wouldn't go with a £5 mouse from the pound shop. And I've got a fairly decent Logitech, can't remember what it's called, keyboard, and I'm happy with it. But if I somehow broke it, or if I were lucky enough to buy a new computer and need a new keyboard, I'm sure this would be fine. It looks, everything I've heard is good and positive and nice. £100 is a bit much for compared to perfectly functional things you'll find in Currys. But I'm prepared to believe that it's worth the extra. It's not it's not £1,000. Is it hot? It's really hard to get excited about it. But then, as I did say on Discord, it does remind me of the Auric Atmos with its tasteful grey and red keys. So, all right, just this once I'll say it's hot. But next time you're going to have to work twice as hard to get me to vote for a keyboard.
I sit here with Keychron C3. I think that was a hardware earlier this year, actually, which is a wonderful everyday keyboard. If you want something a bit cheaper, that one's about £30-40. I've used the K7 as well in the Keychron range, which is a slightly more compact version of that, which is excellent. In fact, sits on my kitchen iMac. So I'm sure I can vouch for the quality of Keychron stuff. It's excellent, and I'm sure the John's described that accurately. So I'm going to say hot. John, I assume you are too.
Yeah, I mean, I went in this. I had a very clear definition of what I wanted, and I had a requirement for quality, longevity, and also for me key action. I hate spongy keys, and I hate short action keys. I'll put up with it on a laptop because it's kind of a physical necessity, but on a desktop for me it's non-negotiable, and I hate that kind of fingers in treacle feel that you get from some desktop systems. So that's why I must confess I am a complete keyboard nerd for desktop systems, and I thought this time round I wanted something like the DAS keyboard that I've got without the numerical keypad, and I wanted it to be Bluetooth. The flashy lighting bit I don't care about, and it's switched off all the time anyway to save battery. The action's excellent, the size is exactly perfect what I wanted for, and viewed in that, I'm going to get 5, 6, 7, 8 years life out of this thing, and viewed from that point of view, 99 quid is neither here nor there.
That's a hot then, I take it.
Hot.
Okay, alas, you've not quite swung it amongst the audience. It was a tight one, but by my head count, I think it's a 9-12 defeat in the audience for those who managed to knock out their votes. So sadly, I haven't quite run over the crowd, but have won the studio. So thank you very much to John and Darian. Thank you very much to everybody who's joined us live, and you can join us live every week at pcpro.link/Discord, I think. And we're also live on YouTube these days if you fancy looking at old men with beards. We will be back, or some without beards. We'll be back next
and hair sometimes. Yeah,
sometimes with hair. We'll be back next Thursday. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. We'll see you then. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Well, I've got to get on with things because I've got to go and see Taylor Swift this evening.
Oh, not you as well. I was this
What?
10 minutes on the news of interviewing people going to the Taylor Swift concert. And it's like,
good. I was worried I was going to be the only one there.
no, yeah, I think you're.
Why are you going? Are you being taken by a youth?
Yeah, you may be aware I have a wife and daughter, and they can be quite persuasive.
They can't just go by themselves, and you go to the pub.
Well, it's a tempting idea, but no, I quite like that "Shake It Off" song. I'm hoping she'll play that, and otherwise, I don't know. Just hopefully it'll be a tight 40-minute set, and we'll get home for.
Bound to be.
Yeah.
If it's a 40-minute set, just remind me how much were the tickets?
Actually, they were only about £100 each, so only the cost of a keyboard.
So £100 for a 40-minute set. That would go down very well, won't it? There'll be rioting.
If it were £100, honestly. We paid £100. I think it's actually a 3-hour set, and frankly, the money having been paid, I would probably enjoy a 40-minute set more than a 3-hour one.
Do you know which switches Taylor Swift uses though?
What network switches?
Is she blue, clicky, or brown?
Oh, I see. Keyboard switches.
Yeah.
No, I'll ask her if there's a convenient
Let us know.
juncture in the show. If there's a lull and there's an opportunity where I can
A Q&A at the end.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
She stops afterwards and says, "Anybody want to say anything else?"
When you do your fake selfie and you insert your picture in, you could put a fake answer in as well, and no one would know.
Oh, me? Well, I don't have the Pixel that Pixel capability, unfortunately, but I'll use Grok to insert Taylor Swift into all of my old photos. Anyway, so as I say, I've got stuff to do. So
Bye.
I hope everyone has enjoyed this post-amble, and we'll see you all next week.
See you later, people. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
What do I have to click on here? You have to click something.
I have to click on leave, and I'm not successfully doing it because my... There we go.